quilters, and I'm happy to have you join me today as we explore the Pinwheel Block. The Pinwheel Block is an old block. There are quilts that have been found from as far back as 1795 that had that block in it. It's a very simple block and is made of two fabrics, primarily just two fabrics. One fabric represents the pinwheel and one fabric represents the background. It is believed that this block came to America from the Netherlands because it mimics all of those beautiful windmills that dot the land there. So we're going to get into the pinwheel block, and then I'm also going to share with you some variations of the block. There are many. Because it's an old block and a very simple block, through the years people have made many variations of it. So let's get started. When you choose your fabrics for this block, make sure there is a definite contrast. That's the first thing. We have to make sure we can tell where the pinwheel is and where the background fabric is. And so I've chosen a couple of fabrics that have a high contrast. And that's what you want to do as you look through your stash of African fabrics. Make sure you choose two fabrics that have a very high contrast. And so once you have chosen your fabrics, you're going to cut 2 squares out of each fabric. And these squares should be 6 3/4 inches. So from both fabrics, cut 2 squares that are 6 3/4 inches in size. And we're going to start with that. The pinwheel block is made of half square triangles. And here again is the block that I have made as it will look when we finish making the one here on the table. And so the first thing you want to do is to put your fabrics together and mark them. So putting your fabrics together, right sides together. That means that when you are done with them, with the marking, they are ready for you to sew them. So I'm going to put them right side together just like this. And now I have them all ready to mark and to sew. And we're going to use the method of drawing the line on the back of the fabric to sew them so that we don't have to really worry about the bias edges. And I think since I'm using a lead pencil, I'm going to show you how to mark your fabrics on this side because the pencil will show up better here. So I'm going to take my ruler and I want to make a line from one diagonal to the other. And I want to make sure my fabrics are fully lined up. And I hope you can see this. And we're going to draw a line from one diagonal to the other. This is a very important line that we're going to use later on. And just using a regular number 2 pencil, nothing fancy. Remember, we're drawing on the back of the fabric, so it doesn't matter that this is here. And there is the line, and I hope you can see that. I'll pick it up and put it closer to the camera. Okay, now that we've drawn that first line, we're going to measure 1/4 of an inch on both sides of that line and draw a second and third line. So I'm measuring 1/4 of an inch away from the first line, and I'm going to draw a second line here. And once again, I'm going to measure 1/4 of an inch away from that first line and draw a third line. Now let's talk about these 3 lines. The first one that I drew that you can see in the middle is going to be our cutting line. The two lines that I drew on either side of it will be our stitching lines. So I'm going to put some pins in this, take it to the sewing machine, show you how to stitch it, and ultimately cut it. And you just want some pins to hold the two fabrics together so they don't slide around while you are stitching. Okay, I have this all pinned, and now we will go to the sewing machine. Okay, we're at the sewing machine, and now I'm going to stitch the two pieces of fabric together, stitching them on the two stitching lines that were drawn on both sides of the first line. And so here we go. And you want to make sure you maintain that 1/4 of an inch, so stitch right on the line that you have drawn. Okay, that's one side. And now let's just turn it around and stitch on the other side. And you will do this for the other two squares as well. I'm just going right through this so that you can see how it's done, but you will do the same thing for the other two squares that you cut. Put them together, right sides together, put a few pins in to hold the fabrics together, draw the lines necessary on one of your fabrics so that you can stitch and then cut. And once we cut, then we will press. Okay, here is our block that has been stitched, and I think you can see the stitching, the two lines of stitching there. And you see the middle line is still, I haven't done anything with that at this point. So now I'm just going to sit here, take my scissors, and cut this apart on that middle line. And once I do this, I'll be ready to press, and I will have 1/2 of the pinwheel block made. When we open this up, there are our two sets of half square triangles. And then we will put the others with it, and we will have our pinwheel. And I just did something that I don't want you to do. I want to make sure that the pinwheel is going in the correct direction. And so I have to be careful when I'm putting this together that I make sure that everything is turning. Pinwheels show motion, and you want to make sure you put your blocks together in such a way that you get to see the motion. Also in this case, I have a lighter fabric and a darker fabric. I'm going to press that seam allowance toward this darker fabric. Okay, there's one, and here's the other one. And we have two more. So that we can complete our pinwheel block. Okay, now we have completed pressing all of our pieces, and we want to arrange them in such a way that we create the pinwheel. Okay, here are the four corners, or the four small pieces, or four small components of the windmill, of the pinwheel block. And let's put them together so that we can see the pinwheel. And remember, you will decide how you want to put yours so that the pinwheel becomes quite obvious. It can be the black fabric, or it can be the tan and yellow fabric. But you do want to put that pinwheel and put those together in such a way that as your eye goes around, you can see the movement of the pinwheel. Now all we need to do is sew this component to this one. So the top component here to this top component. Then we will have one last seam that we will sew down the middle. So here we go. And let me just back up. Before I start sewing, I need to do some trimming. The one thing about triangles is they always give you these little dog ears. And things seam together a lot better if we get rid of the little dog ears first. So here I go with a tiny pair of scissors. I'm just going to clip these little dog ears off so that the seams will go together a lot more easily, and the fabrics will nestle. So that's one. And let's get the dog ear off of here. You can see it sticking up right there. So we want to get that off. And here's the other one. There are two on each little block. And you want to make sure you turn your blocks so that you see the pinwheel. And I'm going to continue trimming dog ears. And I want you to do the same thing when you make the block so that it also reduces bulk in your finished product. And it doesn't hurt to get rid of them. They don't serve any purpose now. So just clip them off. And once again, I have established my pinwheel. And you are looking at it thinking the black fabric is the pinwheel, which is fine with me. Or you're looking at it thinking the tan and yellow fabric is the pinwheel, which is okay. So now let's sew these together. Right sides together. And I am going to use some pins because I want these seam allowances to nestle. And I want it to sew smoothly. So I'm going to put some pins in it. Not a lot, but I do believe in using pins where necessary. Sometimes I use clips, but in this case I'm going to use pins. And that's the bottom component. Now I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing for the top component. And we get these seams nestling in. And I'm just going to assembly line sew these. I'll run one of them through the sewing machine and then just run the other one through and press them, and they'll be ready for the final seam that has to be made to put them together. And I always like to check and keep myself, really where I need to be before I start stitching, because I don't want to have to take anything out. So here we go. Let's get them stitched together. Now I'll take the pins out. Okay, you get to the middle, you want to make sure that the seam allowances are nestling right on top of each other. Check the bottom seam allowance so that the feed dogs don't turn one of those pieces of fabric inward, because you want everything to lie as flat as possible so that you get a very neat middle seam. And quite honestly, once I press this, I have finished the pinwheel block. It's that easy, that simple. And there we have it. And we can see how our points come together. And at this point, I'm going to press this middle seam, and we will talk about the finished block. And by the way, I press this seam open as well. I just like for these blocks to be as flat as possible. And so when I finish pressing, that usually happens because I have pressed that middle seam open and there's a whole lot less bulk to deal with. And so here it is. When you finish that middle seam, notice that the seam has been pressed open right across here. And here we have our finished pinwheel block. All right, I mentioned earlier that the pinwheel block is an old block, and because it is an old block, through the years, several people have made variations of the block. They have taken the basic 2 pieces of fabric and they've cut them in various ways to just make them a little more complex, make the block a little more interesting. This block is known by a variety of names, as are the variations of this block. And I'm going to show you one simple variation right now, if you'd like. And here it is. Here is the same block. It's in 3 different fabrics, and you can see that very easily. This fabric and this one came from the same piece. It was dark on one end and got lighter on the other end. So I thought I would use those together and then put this particular fabric in. And when you're choosing fabrics, once again, for this pinwheel block, you want to choose fabrics that have a contrast. We know exactly where the pinwheel is in this variation of the block. Now, I call this the pinwheel star. I've seen that several times. However, I'm going to share with you in a little while where you can get directions to make this, and it's called the merry-go-round block. So pinwheel blocks are known by a variety of names. Here is the same block with just 2 of our fabrics. And once again, I think this works. Even though it's blue on blue, one of the fabrics has that yellow in it that makes it stand out so that you can still see the pinwheel going around and around and around on the circle. If you are interested in getting the directions for making this variation of the pinwheel block, you can get those decorations online, and I'm going to give you the website address in just a minute. I hope you can see this, but I'll read it just in case as you're trying to jot it down. It's quilt in a day, all one word, quiltinaday.com/free pattern /patterns/merry-go-round _12 PDF. And once again, quiltinaday.com/free pattern /patterns/merry-go-round _12 PDF. And when you go to that website, you will see this, Quilt in a Day merry-go-round. And these are the instructions for making this variation of the pinwheel block. Notice even in this example, there are 3 fabrics. There is a white background fabric, and then there is a blue background fabric and a yellow pinwheel. Or some of you may say, oh, I don't agree with that, Vivian. There is a white background fabric, a yellow background fabric, and a blue pinwheel, and that is perfectly okay. It's how we see it. And this would give you a chance to use 3 different fabrics to make your merry-go-round block or your pinwheel star, or you may see this as another name. When you look at this video, I want you to look down in the description, and I'm going to list some more names for the pinwheel block there that you may want to research and try making some of those. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me as we made the pinwheel block. Bye-bye.